Hello and welcome to 7 Days of Halloween. Hi everyone, it's Monica and welcome back to day 3 of 7 Days of Halloween. Well, pull out your Halloween stamps because today we're going to be using several sets from Tim Holtz. And what we're going to be creating are fun little, I want to say like flashcards to use in your junk journals. You can use them as card starters. There's lots of things you can do with little flashcards. And we're just going to have some fun today using several of our Halloween sets. Now, there's such a small window of time to use our Halloween sets, but to be honest with you, it seems lately Halloween crafting is coming sooner and sooner. I mean, I know that I've started to see Halloween creations since early September, and it's just going to continue through the end of October. But ordinarily, you only have a small window, probably just a couple of months, to use your Halloween stamps. Not to say that there aren't some stamps in certain Halloween sets that you can use all year round, but a lot of times we forget about those. So I think even though the Halloween season might be ending, it's still a good idea to keep those stamp sets handy just to peruse them when you are looking to create a design. All right, so what we're going to do today is we're going to create some oversized labels, which I'm also calling flashcards, because you can certainly use these as little flashcards. And I'm just using plain old manila envelope to create my cards. Now these little strips are measuring about 5.5 by 2.5, but certainly you can make them any size that you want. But just keep in mind, you don't want to make them too big or too small. Find a size that works for you. Even if you go 1/4 of an inch bigger than what I'm using or 1/4 of an inch smaller, I think the 5.5 by 2.5 is a good starting point. And I'm going to cut out several tabs because I know I'm going to make several of these little inserts. So if you want to, as you're going along, you can make them a little bit smaller. Some of them may be a little bit bigger. And then as you're crafting along, you can see what size you like best. All right, so once you have all of your labels cut out, then the next thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to grunge up the background and punch the corners. Now, you can punch your corners using a round corner punch, but I'm using more of a straight edge label corner punch. And I really love this punch, and it's become quickly my favorite. I used to typically use round corner punches, but this one is such a great effect that I tend to have it on my desk ready to go to use it anytime. So I'm going to go ahead and just punch all the edges first before I dive into my inky mess. Okay, so I want to create some grungy background, and the color I'm going to use for this is frayed burlap. But you can also use any other colors that you want. I mean, if you want to try different backgrounds, certainly get out some of your grays, some of your browns, some of your blacks even to create your background. And this is certainly an easy technique where you just add your ink to your media mat, spritz it just a bit, and then just start adding color. There really is no rhyme or reason for this. Just have some fun. Now, what I would recommend is do the background of all your labels first, because this is probably the most messy part of your project, and you certainly want to get all of these done so they can be set aside and dried. So this is why it's important that you cut out as many strips that you know you're going to want to be using, because this really is an assembly line. You want to first cut out your paper, then you want to do your corners, and now we're doing our background. So if you can do this in steps, you'll be able to get several decorative Halloween flashcards in a short period of time. So I am using up all of my ink here. As you can see, I even used some of my paper to tab on other paper that had already been dipped in the ink. I don't want to lose any of this ink, so I am just having a good time using as much as I can. And then once you have all of your backgrounds inked up, you definitely want to set them aside to dry. You can use your heating tool if you want, but keep in mind your paper might curl a little bit, which is not a big deal at all, but just kind of keep that in mind. All right, so once your backgrounds are completely covered and dried thoroughly, then we're going to start decorating them. So kind of peruse through your stamp sets, and I would recommend pulling out several sets. You're going to be using different stamps from different sets. I mean, certainly you can just use one stamp set if you like to, but I always find it fun to mix and match. So don't be afraid to do that. Just make sure when you are mixing and matching that you keep your stamp sets separately, so that way when they do go back into the original packaging, they make it to the right home. All right, so as you can see, I am using my Misty, and we're going to go ahead and just pull out some of our background stamps here to give it a little bit more texture. There are several background stamps out there, but the one that I'm using here is called, I think this one is called Scattered. I can't remember specifically, but I'll certainly list it for you in the description box, so that way if you want to find it and use this background, you can do that as well. All right, so for the ink on the background, I am just using some basic archival ink, and I am going to have a heavy hand on this because I want to make sure I get some nice coverage. And for backgrounds, you don't really have to use the Misty. I do have it there just ready to go, but you don't need to use the Misty for your backgrounds. I am just using it to catch some of the excess ink, and as you can see, I'm just really kind of just being a little random about this and adding my background to my tags. Okay, so here we go. The first stamp set we're going to be using is called Specimen, and this is a really fun one. When it first came out, I didn't jump on it because it had these oversized butterflies and moths and beetles, and I just wasn't sure if I'd be able to use them. But I really did love the little label that said Collection of Specimens number 3616, and that really is the reason I bought the stamp set, to be honest with you. But now that I have it, of course, I'm finding multiple ways to use these oversized butterflies and moths, and this is one of them. So for a Halloween card, I think the moth works better than the butterflies, but certainly if you want to use the butterflies, you can do that too. But I'm just using the moth on this particular one, and I am inking it up with some black ink from scrapbook.com, and I'm going to be using my Misty to go over to give it several layers. And as you can see, as I'm stamping the moth, I am not putting the entire moth onto the tab. These little label tabs are not going to be big enough to use some of these oversized images in its entirety, but really you don't want to. I think part of the effect and part of the aesthetics of these are to have images half off of the edge. As you can see here, it really looks great. All right, so once I have my focal image stamped, now I'm going to come in with the label. And this is the label that I was talking about just a minute ago, which is what caused me to buy this set. It's a really great label, and it not only works for Halloween projects, but it can work for other projects as well. I love making apothecary projects, and this one is fantastic for that. So now that we have our focal point and our sentiment, it's just a matter now of filling in the blank spaces. And you can go as busy as you want or as simple as you want. I am going to go ahead and add another beetle here. And this is the ladybug from that same collection. And I'm going to add a little color. Now, I love adding red to my vintage designs. I know that blacks and browns typically are the colors you're going to use, but I think red also gives it a really nice pop. And I think the reason that I like it so much is if you look at some of the vintage labels, they always have red in them. And I think that's really why I typically add red to items that are labels or backgrounds, anything like that, especially numbers. As you can see in the top left corner, that identification number, I used red just because I think it gives it a nice little pop. And of course, typically when we think of ladybugs, we think of red and black. So I thought it was a good color choice. Okay, so now that I have two big bugs on my tags, it's just a matter of finding some smaller labels to go ahead and add to my little flashcards to fill in some of the empty space. You could certainly stop here if you want, but to me, I'm not a minimalist. I tend to actually like to fill up my tags and my labels as much as I can, because if I have open space, I want to use it. So the set that I kind of went towards for some of my backgrounds was the newer set. It's called Tidbits, and I think this just came out a few months ago, and it's a really fantastic set. It has numbers, it has words, it has just different statements. So you can see here, you've got a whole variety of choices. So I'm certainly sure that you can find something. And I decided to use the word statement here on the top. And I'm going to be adding this stamp using my black ink. And then once I was finished adding that, I did go to the same stamp set, and I found another stamp that worked perfect to just kind of fill in the bottom space. The stamp I ended up choosing was package number 72, but honestly, I think there are so many stamps that would work in this Tidbits collection. I mean, you have numbers, you have numbers with letters, you have anything that looks somewhat industrial. I also think that these look like items from invoices, so you have a big variety with this stamp set. And to be honest with you, these really are my favorite types of stamp sets. I love the Tidbits one, and then I have both the eccentric and the field notes, which also have a multitude of sizes and a variety of stamp sets, and these just give such great background and interest to items that you're stamping, and I just love them. And then once I was done with the package number 720 stamp, I did pull a couple more stamps from the field notes set that I had just mentioned, just to fill in the corner and just another blank space. But like I said, ultimately you can just use as many stamps or as few stamps as you want as you go along. If you like the way it looks, it's time to stop. And if you feel that you need to add a few more stamps to fill in some of those empty spaces, then I say go for it. And then once I had all the stamps that I wanted to use, I did go over it with some more ink on the edges. I really wanted to have a little bit more darker frame on these. So that's when I came in with my, I believe I used scorched timber is what I want to say, but you can use walnut stain. Any of your darker inks I think work great for framing of cards as well as tags, and that's what I ended up doing here ultimately. Okay, so let's go ahead and make one more tag. And the stamp set that I'm pulling from is called Examination. And this is an older one of our Halloween stamp sets from Tim Holtz, of course. And this is more of an anatomy stamp set. You have your partial skeleton. You've got this big label called Physician and Surgeon. You've got some poison labels. And then you have some wonderful labels, identification check, and you also got your table of the skeleton. And then on the bottom you have several choices of your pharmacy labels as well. So it's a really great stamp set. And for Halloween, I love working with anatomy images as well. I think apothecary and anatomy are my two go-to themes for Halloween, and they really work well. All right, so let's go ahead and stamp down our physician and surgeons, and that'll be our main sentiment that we're going to use for this. And then once we get that stamped down, we're going to go ahead and choose some of these other images to add to our anatomy tag. Now remember, on these flashcards or these tags, whatever you want to call them, a lot of the images that we're using, you're not going to be using the entire image. So for the label, of course, I used the entire physicians and surgeons because I wanted that to be my main label, I guess, or my main sentiment on my tag. But as I start going into the images, we are going to be only using part of the images. Now, if you have other anatomy stamp sets that would work in combination with this, pull them out. I mean, typically most of my stamps, most of them are Tim Holtz because I love using Stampers Anonymous stamps. I love the deep rubber stamps, but certainly they can get to be a little expensive at times. And that's why a lot of times I don't necessarily buy them the year of their release. I might wait a couple years, try to find them on sale, especially if there's only one or two stamps that I like in the set. There's certainly nothing wrong with that. I do it, and then I have it for my collection, and then I can use it for future years. But I did find this anatomy set. Again, it's not the deep rubber stamp, but it was a little bit easier on the pocketbook. And I ended up buying it and adding it to my shop as well. So once we are finished with this video, if you want to take a look at the description box, I will have all of the items that I'm using listed in the description box with links so you can find them easily. All right, so as you can see, this skeleton here, I'm only using the top portion of it, the torso part, and I'm not using the entire image. You could, though, if you wanted to turn your tag or your label the other way to have it long ways, you can certainly fit that entire skeletal image on your tag, but that would take up most of the real estate. I did want to add some other anatomy images, and that's why I decided to do it this way ultimately. So I pulled out the phalanges, the hand that has some of those finger bones, and I am adding that also. And then there's a fantastic image of an eyeball. I think that probably is my favorite part of the stamp set, is that eye image that we're going to be using in just a minute here. But the stamp set has rib cages, it has brain, it has the heart, it has lungs, it has teeth. It has some really great images, as you can see on the left of my screen here. So hopefully you'll check out my shop and see if this is something you can use for your projects as well. Okay, so with all of my images stamped, I still had a little bit of open space at the bottom, and I thought it would be fun to add some sort of a label. So I went to the set that we're using, the examination set, and I tried to use that table of skeleton, but it was just a little bit too big. I really didn't want to cover that wonderful hand. So then ultimately I ended up going back to my Field Notes stamp set, and I pulled out orders taken day or night. And that kind of did fall into the physician surgeon theme. So I thought that was a good choice. That Field Notes stamp set gets so much use. If you don't have that in your arsenal, I would say it definitely is a good one to add. It's been around for a while now, so I'm sure you could probably find it on sale if you kind of snooped around. But it is a stamp that I go to time and time again, and I get a lot of use out of that. I know a lot of times these stamps that have the multiple stamps, you know, the field note stamps, the eccentric stamps, those tend to be a little bit more expensive, but if you can afford it, they're certainly well worth the money, because look at the amount of stamps that you get, and I go to these time and time again. Okay, so I'm just going to finish up this one last flashcard by adding figure 1 and figure 2, and then I will add some more distress ink around the edges, and that's pretty much going to do it. So this is just a couple of examples, plus my prototype that I have on the very top using the Undertaker stamp set, of what you can do to use multiple stamps on a small surface. These are great for junk journal inserts. You can use them as bookmarks, you can use them as card starters. They're just fantastic. So I hope that you give it a try, because I love making collages, especially when I can use multiple stamp sets, because I really feel like I'm getting my money's worth. All right, everybody. So as I said, I will leave a list of all the items that I'm using in the description box. So that way, if you want to check out some of these items that you may not have, you can do so. And be sure to check out my shop, Taylormadecards4u.com, as I do have some of these other stamp sets that I've been using in my shop as well, and I would just appreciate the support. All right, everybody, so that completes day 3 of our 7 days of Halloween. If you've enjoyed the series so far, please don't forget to leave me a thumbs up, and of course tell all your friends about the series, and don't forget to peek at the Halloween playlist, because I do have prior Halloween 7 days of Halloween videos in my playlist that will give you hours of enjoyment and inspiration. All right, everybody, thanks so much for stopping by, and we'll see you again tomorrow.